small things matter. And now that the Congress of the PNC is over, well, I shouldn't say it's over as yet, because they're still counting the votes across there. It's important that we do an analysis of what took place at that Congress. I deliberately stayed away from commenting in great detail on what we saw unfolding in the run-up to the Congress. At the PNC and at the AFC. And I did so largely because I did not want the contending parties who were fighting each other in a manner that even their worst opponents would not do. I did not want them to use the PPP as a red herring, so that the people of this country could impartially and dispassionately review the process that they were engaged in. So the PNC went into this Congress, and it needed to reinvent itself. It is a party that has no track record of achievement, and we've demonstrated that in the past. After 28 years in government, we went from the Singapore of the Caribbean in the 1960s to the second poorest country in the Western Hemisphere, rivaling Haiti. You can go back into history and you will see what I'm saying has been proven by various sources external to Guyana. Even the Caribbean Conference of Churches, when they visited Guyana in the early 90s, found the economic destruction shocking, but more so they said there was this air of hopelessness in Guyana, and that was after 28 years of the PNC being in government in Guyana. An air of hopelessness where people were fleeing the country in droves. And that's why in that period we had this massive diaspora. People fled Guyana to Suriname, they fled Guyana to Venezuela, they went to North America, because we practically couldn't eat. Public service wages were about $25 US. That was the average public sector wage per month, $25 US. If you go back in that period, look at the exchange rate and how much people were earning. Our teachers, policemen, nurses, many of them left the profession. They started trading, bringing in goods from the airport to sell in Guyana. So the PNC did not have a great track record after 28 years in government. People of every race suffered. Every social class in our country suffered. Young people and old people suffered, women and men. They all saw a loss of welfare, and they could not see themselves having a bright future in this country. As the Caribbean Conference of Churches pointed out there was this air of hopelessness. So that's the first period that they were in office. And then the second period, 2015 to 2020. And what did we see again? We lost jobs in large numbers. We spent quite a bit of money in that period because the taxes went up significantly. We collected over $100 billion more in taxes, nearly double our tax take. We started losing welfare, the children's grant, pension, took away the subsidy from pensioners, took away the joint services bonus, stopped building farm-to-market roads, put taxes on all the productive sectors. We were heading right back to where they were in that past. And I had no doubt that had they continued in government, oil resources or no oil resources, with their economic philosophy, we would have ended up back as a country like we were in the 90s. Huge debt, massive debt, one of the highest debt burdens in the world, and with very little to show for it. And we had already started heading down that route again. So they lost government, and this is a Congress now that we have elections next year. So I thought that they would need to reinvent themselves, to say to these people, the people of this country, we're trustworthy, you believe us, because people do not believe them anymore. All the promises that were made in 2015 about a good Guyana, I forgot the term they used to use, but they had something about a great time in Guyana and they would fix everything. People saw it differently. So the Congress failed to give the people any assurance that they had a clear economic plan for this country. That's first of all. So Norton mentioned a couple of things that were pulled out of various government documents and said, oh, I'll give you some rent money here and I'll give you something. The usual promises. They failed on that point. And secondly, on the trustworthiness point, their actions and the confusion surrounding the Congress not just made them look more untrustworthy, but even their own people, the contending parties, have declared that the entire process of the Congress was an untrustworthy one, was a rigged one, was designed to achieve a particular outcome. And this is coming from their own leadership. If their leaders, top leaders, Roysdale Ford and the General Secretary of the party who resigned, and Amanza Walton, is saying that their process is rigged, and they withdrew from that contest because they believe that the process is rigged. If you can't be trustworthy to your top leadership and have them defend you, how could you come over as being trustworthy to the people of this country? So they failed miserably on that. They failed miserably on the metric of trustworthiness. And this is a vital metric, because that's all you have when politicians make promises. That's all you have, their trustworthiness. Will they do what they say they will do? And the APNU failed to do that when they were in office. All the things they listed in their manifesto, they did not complete or do 10% of them. We pride ourselves in this. If you look at our manifesto, our promise to the people of this country, they're 90%. Already in the first 3 years, we had we'd fulfill 90% of them, the promises. We've gone beyond those promises. We promised, for example, 20,000 online scholarships. We're already at 28,000. And that's only through the GOAL program. Only through the GOAL program, leaving out the GROW and WIN and the BIT programs, which is 50,000 people really we have on scholarships or studying paid for by the government of Guyana. People of every race from every region in this country. So trustworthiness is a vital metric. They failed on that. And then the PNC has this old stigma of stealing elections. Historically, they're known for doing this. A stigma that they can't shake. So if there is a new PNC, a repositioned PNC, they have to tell the people of this country that they have moved away from the past, which was we all thought they had moved away from in 2015. They had presented a new image and we said no. Everybody said give them a chance, particularly young people who did not know about the 28 years where they stayed in government through stealing elections. So young people and everyone said, that's in the distant past, give them a chance. And then the first opportunity they had at power again, they tried to steal elections in 2020, and that's well documented now. So you have a huge baggage on your shoulder, a party that has come to power and stayed in power only through rigged elections. So you had this opportunity now to say, we're going to change. And if you can't manage your internal elections, if your competitors are saying you rigged your own internal process, then how are you going to say to the people of this country that you have changed and you will, at the national level, respect democratic norms? You cannot say that. And so we've seen a whole pile of accusations. Now, if the CPU from a computer that has your membership disappears, the general secretary of the party doesn't know where it went to, whether it's manipulated. Your competitor said we had a surge in membership of the party suddenly. We couldn't get access to see who these members are. The key people, the general secretary of the party was excluded from key processes within the party that would bear upon the sanctity and the fairness of the elections. They were excluded from that. When there were accusations that individuals were handpicked and placed in key leadership positions so that they can assist with the rigging process. When you hear that just on Congress Day itself, one member of the party saying we have 2,000 delegates, and then by the afternoon you hear Vincent Alexander saying, oh, there were 1,300 delegates. A 700 difference on the same day. The guy who you picked and said, how to put in charge of the process says, we have 2,000 delegates. Don't listen to PPP and the other people. And then by the evening or the following day, Vincent Alexander comes to the podium and says, there were 1,300 delegates. Where did the 700 other delegates disappear to? And that was on election day itself, at the Congress itself. So the vile campaigning among the contenders, they invented some stories about each other and dug up stories about sexual harassment and all of that wouldn't even come from their worst competitors in the PPP. We wouldn't get so low and be so vile. And that is how the contest, the atmosphere within their party and the Congress. That was the atmosphere within which these elections and the Congress was held. So if they can't manage their own affairs at a small scale, that's why I said small things matter, how can they manage this country? They had clearly no answers, no economic plan that was laid out there. They didn't move away from their undemocratic past. In fact, they reinforced that they would steal internal and external elections if given a chance. And then they never demonstrated that they could be trustworthy. So how can you then paint a picture that you want to form the next government and people should give you a chance and you can't fix it yourself? And I can list all the vile things that were said about between the different candidates. I have them here. I'm not going to bore you with this, but you should get a chance to see yourselves. They have damaged each other in a major way. How can you say that this leader and try to push him, your new leader, is guilty of sexual harassment, and then again go and I'm not sure I believe that. I must say that. I'm not sure I believe it, but that's their business. They got to fix it themselves because it's not a police matter. But then coalesce around the same leader for the election. How can you say that and put him up and say this is the person who is heading our party now? They are in big problems. I'll come back to them. But before I move on, just to show you the incompetence. So on Sunday, the elections were held. We heard on Sunday that just over 1,000 delegates voted, maybe 1,060 persons. And these 4 persons were elected, and they listed them. The leader of the party, all the way down to the treasurer. That they had to name the 15 persons of the central executive of the party. But they wanted to announce early results for these key positions. So that's reasonable. We're today, Thursday. This is like maybe 2:30 on Thursday. They voted on Sunday and they still have not named the 15 members. They haven't counted the ballots as yet. That's what they said. They haven't counted the ballots as yet. Now one would ask, where are these ballot papers? Who is securing them? If they haven't counted them as yet, what is to say that they're not being manipulated? Because I cannot believe that you will take almost 4 days to count a small number of ballots. It's either you're doing something illegal, you're deliberately doing this, or you're unbelievably incompetent. Unbelievably incompetent. It's either you're tampering with the ballots or you're unbelievably incompetent. There is no third option. There is no third option. So Vincent Alexander issued a statement and he said, the count for the Central Executive Committee members required the examination of approximately 1,300 ballots, each bearing 59 candidates in order to determine which 15 of those 59 candidates obtained the highest numbers of votes across these ballots. The duration of this exercise, while being quite time-consuming, has also been influenced by CARICOM Day, holiday, etc. Usual stuff. So tomorrow they're going to announce the result. Now, we had our Congress recently. Robson Ben, another commissioner at GCOM, was in charge of our internal elections. In our central committee, we had registered delegates, a fairly large number of registered delegates, but those who voted, the valid votes that were cast for the central committee, that is the 35 members of the central committee, there were 2,458 votes cast. 30 were spoiled votes. So we had 2,428 valid votes, and there were 93 candidates. 93 candidates. The results of those elections were announced the following day. 93 candidates. Remember, they're going to have about 1,000 odd valid votes, like they declared earlier, and 60 candidates, and they haven't been able to count this as yet. We had more than twice as many delegates. But we didn't have one election. We also had a second ballot to elect 5 candidate members, and so we had 2,459 votes cast, 96 were spoiled votes. So 2,000, they listed more than 5 names on those, so they were declared spoiled. And 2,363 valid votes, and we had to, out of 60 contesting members, we had to select 5. So 2 ballot papers, each with 2,400. So if you add the number of ballots that had to be counted, was 4,917 ballots compared to their 1,000, 1/5 of it, and we had 59, in fact 60 plus 93, 153 candidates. So 3 times the number of candidates and 5 times the number of ballots. And we had a machinery that was clear. Nobody went in the room, headed by Robson Ben. And within 24 hours, because the votes took place on Saturday, and by mid Saturday afternoon, in fact it's less than 24 hours, and by Sunday 2 o'clock, the results were announced for everyone. It showed incompetence here, either incompetence or, as I said before, you have a tampering of the ballots going on there. Either way, how can you imagine a party like that ever forming a government in this country? Can't address this issue. I'm going to come back to APNU in a minute because I want to talk a bit about my friends from the AFC to on their Congress. So if, again, APNU had some specific tasks out of this Congress, and it failed on all the parameters. And if ever a party needed to reinvent itself, now it was the AFC. And why is that so? The AFC emerged into politics claiming that it was multiracial, that it was better than the two old political parties, PPP and PNC, that it had these great lofty ideas for the future of our country, that they brought great intellectual bearing to the task of government, that they were different, they were incorruptible, and the experience in government showed a very different light, a very, very different light. It became the most corrupt, even worse than the PNC, the more corrupt in government than any party in the history of this country, and we can prove that. It was spineless. In the sectors that they managed in the economy, and they got given some substantial sectors, they failed miserably. And they moved away from every bit of the principles, or every single principle that they outlined to people, and made them very attractive to them in the pre-2015 period, because people didn't know them well. So they needed to get rid of that history. But what did we see? Because they lost ground significantly after 2020. In fact, it's a dead party. It's dead. They lost their membership, everybody walked away from them. And you saw that at their Congress itself. They used to have a large Congress. The Congress, it was mediocre, a very mediocre Congress. Look at the images. Mediocre Congress. I don't know where it is held, but a very gaudy with lots of colors and all of that sort of thing. Really a low-life kind of Congress. So Nigel Hughes, the first thing he said, he lied. He said, I spent my last press conference, 3/4 of my last press conference, talking about him and the AFC. Now, you were here. You know, I dismissed their Congress. I didn't even want to speak about it. But he said that there, and that's why today I'm going to spend a substantial amount of time, since he wished it. So I'm going to spend a substantial amount of time talking about the AFC and Nigel Hughes. So I can, when he says that in the future, it would be the truth. This party tried to present an image that Nigel Hughes is the new leader, will take the AFC to greater heights. We have now a new leader. But what did we get? We got a group of recycled politicians. This is a recycled party of recycled politicians. Not a single one of them is new and doesn't have baggage. It's a bunch of corrupt people who have huge overload of issues that they still are they're yet to answer the people of this country for. So this is a recycling of old leaders. So the top 3 persons are Nigel Hughes. Nigel Hughes is not new. Nigel Hughes was twice chairman of the party. Now there are 3 top posts in the party: chairman, the leader, the chairman, and the general secretary. So Nigel Hughes was chairman twice. He resigned in 2013, and he resigned again in 2016. So he's not new. Nigel Hughes is a recycled leader who had been there from since 2011 in that party. David Patterson, you know David Patterson, he is also recycled. Raphael Trotman is recycled. Was formerly leader, now general secretary. Cathy Hughes and the other, Cathy Hughes is recycled. Ramjatan, recycled. The people who are new, the few who are trying to take over the party, particularly younger people, they were all pushed aside. So it is a cabal of recycled leaders who have a huge baggage. Let's start with Cathy Hughes. Cathy Hughes is still to answer the country about her role in giving contracts to herself in her own ministry. She signs the contract, the checks on behalf of the company whilst a minister, and then she approves in her own ministry contracts for her own company. We have documents to that effect, and there are many other things. Just to give you an example of it. Recycle leader, she needs to answer that. Under Ramjatan's tenure, the ministry was a massive cesspool of corruption. The sale of gun licenses reached unprecedented proportions under Ramjatan. Patterson is now charged with in 2 cases for corrupt practices, leaving out all the huge gifts that he took from state agencies that were buying fancy things, gold jewelry for him and all of that stuff. State agencies buying those for him and giving them as gifts. And he lied, he said, I never wore a bracelet, and then they found pictures of him wearing the same bracelet. Not just corrupt, but also lying about the corruption. Trotman, we know about his infamous role in the PSA, the signing of the PSA, and I'm going to come to that in a moment. And then Nigel Hughes has been involved. I'll talk about him in a moment. Is this not what's new? This is a recycled group of leaders who were there from the beginning, who have lied to the people of this country, who've been engaged, some of them, in corrupt practices, and they're coming to present themselves as new. Oh, we have a new leader now, Nigel Hughes. And by the way, this political party is owned by 2 persons, Trotman and Ramjatan. They're incorporated under the Companies Act. So, and the 2 directors are Raphael Trotman and Ramjatan. So no, the people, though there is delusion on the other side that they own the party, these 2 persons own the party. They can one day decide we can end the party because they're the directors. It's incorporated and owned by these 2 persons. So we've seen there's they talk a lot about diversity. This was a big selling point. But look at the 3 top leaders now who are appointed are of one race. This was their strong selling point in the past. Now, you recall when we put together the Constitutional Reform Commission, that Nigel Hughes spoke about the need for diversity. And he was representing a side that was not diverse. We had 2 female of the 5, 2 women of the 5 that we put on the Constitutional Reform Commission. We had Afro-Guyanese, Portuguese Guyanese, Guyanese, Amerindian, and Indo-Guyanese on the Constitutional Reform Commission, the PPP's rep. And he talked about diversity, and he came from a side, the side that put him up was not diverse. So now this is the great diversity. Why didn't he? This was his own list of candidates. He had this slate. This was his slate. Why didn't he insist on diversity there? What about a woman in one of the top posts? What about somebody of another race in the top post? And he beats his chest about diversity. This is the duplicity of a person like Nigel Hughes. Now, what did they do? As I said before, they've chased away almost all the young people from the party. They made it clear that you don't have a role here. And in doing so, they've damaged some of these people beyond anything that we could have done. It's one thing when the PPP says that Sherrod Duncan was hustling the Chronicle money. But it's another thing when your top leaders in the party take the articles and go around the country in all the party groups and share this with people and say he's not fit to be the leader of our party. Now, he can't emerge back in that party as a leader because you've done the damage internally. And that's what they did, apart from other things. They've damaged them in a major way. When you talk about young people and their growth in the PPP, you can go back into our history, the growth of the PPP. At the highest levels, the cabinet, as I said before, I became president when I was 35 years. I went into the cabinet in my 20s. Finally went into the cabinet in his 20s. He became president 40. We have a young president now. At the last Congress, we have, of the 35 candidates and Central Committee members, 35 Central Committee and 5 candidate members. We had 11 new persons that came into the top leadership of the party. That's over 25% turnover. New people coming in. If you check the names, young people, look at people like Sarah Brown and Brentnell Ashley from Region 1. These are 2 top leaders in Region 1 who have now gone into the top echelons of the party. This is the diversity we have, not just diversity, but young people. They grow in the party. We're already thinking about the next wave of ministers in the future, training them up, making sure that people, grow in the party so they're experienced, they not just at party level in the government, so when they take over, they have a repository of knowledge, they can continue the upward trend for our country. That's what our party wants. Look at what these people did. They just recycle all the old leaders, the leaders with baggage from the past, and brought them back into the fore and excluded the young people. And in excluding them, damaged them by spreading all the rumors and lies about them. Well, maybe some of it may be factual too, but it came from within. This is the AFC. So let me talk a bit about Nigel Hughes now. Since he wanted it, and he said I spent 3/4 of my last press conference talking about him. So I was shocked that minutes after he was elected the leader of the AFC, that he gave an interview with the Demerara Waves and obscenely said he's only going to disengage from the company, his company that is working for Exxon, should he become president. And he may not engage in discussions in his party that he is leader of when it comes to oil and gas policy. The leader of the party saying, I will not engage in discussions in my party on oil and gas matters because Exxon is my client. So he then said, should there be a conflict of interest between the national interest, and I must say that Demerara Waves pose some really great questions, because it's even more obscene, and I think you should read it. Every Guyanese should read it, how obscene it is. I can't convey that, the feeling of revulsion that I felt. This is someone aspiring to the highest office in the country, who have just been elected the leader of a party. He wants to be the presidential candidate, and says, if there is a conflict between Guyana now and ExxonMobil, I will take the side of ExxonMobil. I will defend my client. Now, I thought that when you're running for office, you want to change this country. You have to have some lofty ideals. It sometimes costs you in your pocket. I did not want to return to politics in Guyana. I had started a pretty lucrative career in the period after I left office. I returned to it, and I lost for it. But people, sometimes you have to forego the private benefits, money basically, and to when national interest calls you. And in this case, he was asked directly, and he says, no, only if I become president, then I will do that. In the meantime, I will work for Exxon, and I will, if Guyana's interest conflicts with Exxon's interests, my client's interests will prevail. And I will not be part of a discussion at my party level about oil and gas policy. So who would lead the discussions? Like me saying in the PPP, I wouldn't be part of any discussion on a particular matter because I'm working for somebody. Obscene. And this was minutes after he got elected. But is this atypical behavior? It's not atypical behavior of Nigel Hughes, because you recall in 2013 when he resigned from the AFC, it was Oversight Global. APNU was saying, and all of the others, AFC, that we are corrupt. We're developing the hydro. But he was working for the company. He resigned there. And so in 2016, he resigned again. And I want to deal with that resignation in 2016 so that the people of this country will understand what took place in that period. So, you would recall that Nigel Hughes resigned on the 11th, I think, of April. And he gave a vague reason Even the Starbuck News and the others said the reason was vague. They thought that he was aggrieved by apnea. And so now I'm understanding why that resignation took place. Because on the 15th of April, the government started to formally negotiate with ExxonMobil the 2016 PSA. So 3 days before the formal start of the negotiations, or the concluding stages, I shouldn't say formal, the concluding stages of the negotiation, Nigel Hughes resigned. But if you look at the Clyde and Company report, there was a report commissioned by the government of Guyana, Trotman, and that was presented on the 30th of January 2020. It's called Clive and Company, basically to justify that nothing was wrong with the 2016 agreement. But there are some very telling things that came out of a detailed reading of the report. It says that on the 19th of May 2015, EEPGL sent a proposed escrow process flowchart, an escrow process flowchart, setting out various sets and timelines for the execution of a new PSA. And that is what would become the 2016 agreement. So in the period from May 2015, when Nigel Hughes was still chairman of the party, the negotiations started, because Exxon, their own report said that Exxon sent this document over proposing a timeline and the sets of issues to be negotiated that will eventually be the PSA. So Nigel Hughes lied about this when asked by Global Witness. This is Global Witness report, and I'm going to put up this report because Global Witness withdrew the report, but in the withdrawal they said they stand by a number of things, including that some government of Guyana officials must be investigated for what took place in the report. They said they had overestimated the flow to Guyana, but they stand by the other content. But it's good to see this report, and I hope that every Guyanese, all of those who are looking at this program and will look at the program, please go to the party's page. I'm going to upload this report, and you will see some interesting things here in the report. For example, in this report, it says the minister and its lawyer. This is an international organization. Trotman here, Minister Raphael Trotman, Nigel Hughes, lawyer. Exxon here, Guyanese government. Together led the PPP. A flow chart showing the connections. So this is what, I'm going to read a section to what Nigel Hughes said as quoted in this report. Hughes has denied that his relationship with Trotman and Exxon represent a conflict of interest. In July 2019, this was since then they were raising this conflict of interest situation, Global Witness. In July 2019, he told Global Witness that his time as AFC chairman did not really overlap with Trotman's time as Minister of Natural Resources. Hughes did not resign his post as AFC chairman near the start of the Stabroek negotiation. Did resign his post as AFC chairman near the start of the Stabroek negotiations and was not in this post when Trotman was negotiating with Exxon in June 2016. But obviously, Global Witness did not know that the negotiations started based on their own internal document since 2015, when that document was sent over. But however, as reported in the Guyanese press, Trotman became a minister in May 2015, 11 months before Hughes relinquished his AFC position in April 2016. So he said to Global Witness, oh, I was not Exxon lawyer when Trotman was minister. But it wasn't true. 11 months after Trotman became a minister, that's when he resigned. So here is the chairman of the party, in fact, the general secretary of the party, negotiating with Exxon, and the chairman of the party is Exxon's lawyer. And in the PSA and the bridging deed, both have listed as their local offices his law firm. In both the PSA, the one that everybody says is lopsided, they both listed his law firm as their local offices for all three, for Sinuk, Exxon, and for Hess. So since then, this is there. So I noticed when I mentioned that he didn't read the Act on Politically Exposed Persons, he pointed out there is no law in Guyana to stop politically exposed persons from working for the oil and gas companies, etc., or anyone else. And I see his psychophone say, yes, it's true, there's no law. Well, then I'm politically exposed. I could set up a company, or Vikram Bharrat, or some other minister, and start working for Exxon too. It's what's ethical, first of all, ethical, and secondly, in this case, you already have, in the past, a direct, and now that we're looking at this will cause us, let me make it clear. So Exxon has a lot to answer, because Nigel Hughes, knowing him, he will not want to resign. He is like that. He would want to collect the money and still be leader of the AFC. And conflict of interest would not bother him at all. Because if a person could obscenely say, if Exxon interest conflicts with the national interest, I'll take Exxon's side. Anyone who could say that will not do this. But we're watching what Exxon and the others will do, and the first-tier contractors. And this may necessitate a formal, depending on how that matters, a formal investigation into all these matters. I'm making it clear today. I'm making it clear. We did not, there are lots of politically exposed people. He was politically exposed, as he correctly pointed out. His wife is a member of parliament. And therefore, but we did not, it was not an issue, because we didn't want to. He would have said, oh, we're discriminating against Nigel Hughes. We're saying now, why couldn't he earn a living? That's their first thing, earn a living in Guyana. Well, all along he was doing this. What changed is now he has gone to the AFC. I think it's the best thing for us that he is the leader of the AFC, because Norton is right. And I'll deal with that in a moment, what Norton had to say about that. So now it would make interesting reading for people. Both the Clyde and Company report, which says that Exxon wrote the memo that went to the cabinet, their own report said that, by the way. And this is it. So this is unfolding in a very interesting way. But what is it saying all along? That we have a duplicitous person who likes to talk about national interest. He likes to talk about diversity, but it's not diversity when it comes to his slate and his leadership in the AFC. He talks about Afro-Guyanese interests, but you find out how many Afro-Guyanese Cathy Hughes and the others help in the AFC. You've had more Afro-Guyanese who've gotten scholarships, land, etc. under this government than they got under the APNU. Just duplicitous. And then, here too, money comes above the country. And they want to lecture us about the global goal. Oh, I love constitutional reform. You know, people get attracted to that. We had constitutional reform. We had constitutional reform of a major nature. We probably have one of the most progressive constitutions in the world. Where else you have an ethnic relations commission that has the power to prevent a political party from contesting elections, where if that party uses race as a mobilizing factor, where that has the powers of sanction over the executive, where in the world? But they will never carry a case to the ERC, the constitutional body that we set up to investigate every case. They would go and peddle lies to some congressman. And I see Rickford Burke now has joined his camp. The usual Rickford Burke is hoping to get free legal representation when he comes to Guyana with his extortion case. So psychophantically, I see he's jump on the bandwagon. And a number of other people. But they'll never explore this duplicity here. So this is what we have to deal with. I haven't even spoken about all the other things that Nigel Hughes has been doing in the years that he's been, not just in politics, but in the public domain, and we have a long list, but I'll save that for another day. I do. So the plan was, let me tell you what their plan was. The plan was to say, we're going to make you the presidential candidate. That's the AFC. We're going to do this by commissioning a poll just close to the elections to show that Norton is not the best person to lead the coalition, and therefore you have higher points. And you know how they pay the pollsters. So Nigel Hughes will come out looking better than Norton, and then they would use that to displace Norton. But Norton has made it clear that the presidential candidate has to come from the PNC. And you know what happened? They dealt a major blow to coalition politics in the last government. That is why nobody can trust each other now. So Norton knows that the day he is not presidential candidate, he'll go back. They'd send him back to Bamba Mali. He'd have no role in the party. The moment, he'd lose everything. He knows that. And he knows because that group that was trying to displace him will get rid of him. They will promise him anything in the world to probably get rid of him as the presidential candidate. But if a miracle happens and they get into office, he would have no role. Like he didn't have a role in the last government. And why is he keenly aware of this? He's keenly aware of this because the only way you can do this is through some agreement. And you recall the Cummingsburg Accord. The Cummingsburg Accord was struck between the AFC and APNU. and it listed a number of things. It says, it said that the Prime Minister will chair the cabinet of Guyana. You think anybody ever gave, what's his name again? Nagamotu. Yeah, Nagamotu a chance to chair the cabinet? Nagamotu, the Prime Minister, should have selected the ministers to give to the President to appoint. The Prime Minister was going to appoint all heads of agencies, a whole set of about 15 things, responsibility for the Prime Minister and from the other party. They got into office, the Prime Minister became a glorified rubber stamp that everybody knows now. Kwame McCoy, I keep saying this, Kwame McCoy in our government has a bigger portfolio than the Prime Minister in the APNU government had. Kwame McCoy's portfolio is larger than his portfolio in our government. Our Prime Minister deals with a whole range of issues. They just ignored him. They were treated like basic outcasts, the AFC. They complained. Granger didn't meet with them, didn't value their opinion. They became so corrupt, the AFC people too. And so they were all about privileges and perks. They did not take a principled stand because they should have rebelled and say, no, this is not what we signed up to. But they willingly submitted themselves, became complicit in this, they basically the sidelining of the AFC, because all the leaders were interested in were which portfolio where they would get and the perks that they would get. Unprincipled leadership. So by doing that, they've demonstrated one thing, that no paper is worth anything that you sign up on before the elections. You can make all sorts of promises. So in coalition, they would say, Norton, you will be naming the cabinet. And then afterwards, Norton busy with a half bottle somewhere else. So that's a role they will have for him. He wouldn't be able to manage that party. And they will. So Norton is keenly aware of this. That is why he said that if we bring most of the votes in, how come we wouldn't have the presidential candidate? So if it's not me, it's somebody else from the PNC. It can't be this man from the AFC that they hope to supplant, even if you're 6 feet tall and handsome. That's what Norton said. Even if you're 6 feet tall, and who will run away the moment, given his history of resigning so many times. That's what Norton was basically saying. He resigns every time. But maybe Norton didn't know it was for pecuniary interests, in my view, that he can't handle the rigor of it. And when his personal money interest conflicts with that of the country, he will exit. And so, in a way, Norton was aware of this. And that's why I think he gave the interview, because they were already starting to move on a campaign to displace him, and it would come first of all by people going to talk to him, and then secondly, doing this poll. So clearly, everything they do is transparent. But it's not for the people of this country. These maneuvering, you notice, very little about programs and all of that. Nigel Hughes wants legislation on the oil and gas to share the benefits. Well, I wonder if that conflicts with Exxon, like the local content law that Exxon didn't want, whether he would have still passed it. He would say, no, that conflicts with my client's interest. You can't do that. That is the kind of person we're dealing with. So maybe I should save some of this for future weeks do, because I'm looking forward to this happening, us dealing with this again in the future. But the coalition politics, they themselves have killed the coalition politics. Unless it's buttressed by maybe strong laws, etc. It doesn't work. Nobody believes any longer anything that any of these parties will sign up to, however convenient it is. As I said before, I will share the Global Witness report. I'd asked the staff. I want all of you to go through this report. You'll get some good bit of reading here. I asked a number of people, and I'm shocked that so many people didn't actually see this report. It came out on the APNU, and they did not see the report, because since then the conflict of interest issue was being raised. And imagine if it was that then, how worse it is today. Let me see. I have a number with you. I was thinking about maybe I can deal with the oil and gas issues when Kaichor asks me the questions. I have a number of things here, but I can save it until thing. But let me just give you a brief rundown on some of the things we're working on, so maybe it would reduce the number of questions. So we have gone out for an expression of interest for 3D seismic studies. We believe we went out the last auction without any 3D seismic, so we didn't have much data for the areas. So when you have less data, people don't put in great bids because they don't know what is there. They can't interpret the data. So we have now gone out for 3D seismic. We have 8 bidders who put in their names, and we're pre-qualifying, and then they would have to submit proposals. So we are hoping that all of the unallocated areas, we may have the 3D seismic, which is done by these people. They do it. We don't have to pay for it because it's a very costly exercise, but they can then, they share the data with us and they can sell it to people, the clients. So we don't have any cost, but then people can then use the 3D seismic to maybe to make informed decisions in the future should we go out to an auction. We've received the bill. The technical agencies have all looked at the financial responsibility for oil spill bill. Well, we're going to call it something else, but I mean the law dealing with addressing any potential spill offshore from vessels or from the operators. And as I said before, I want that to get to the Parliament soon. We're going through an intensive process going through the bill with all the technical agencies, EPA, GGMC. It's a tight squeeze to table it before August 10th and pass it, but that's one thing we promise. So we would be equipped now with a tool, a law which says primarily that any company that it causes a spill, whether it is a shipping company, a production company, an exploration company, that they would all be responsible for the cleanup, and also that they would be responsible for consequential losses. That is for fishermen and everyone else should they be affected, the other use. So that's basically the essence of that. We're working on this. We have a substantial, and I think maybe I'd leave this for the ministry to put out a release on this matter. So I've been looking at what now based on what we spoke of last week, about the monitoring, right, of a lot of these issues. So I have here with me like what basically we get now. And we've been able to, so Exxon now shares their dashboard where they're monitoring in real time what's going on offshore. They already have that up and running onshore. So we get to see the screen, and it updates every 10 minutes. And you have some of the key parameters that we get to see, like production data, the tank inventories, the seawater, gas, how much gas is produced, the downtime, power generation, safety, health and environment, flare management, produced water. All of these are on a dashboard that they monitor, that we, 3 agencies now in the government have access to this dashboard: Natural Resources, EPA, and GGMC. So we see this. It's not as though we're not aware of what's going on offshore. And secondly, the presence on shore on the vessel from GRA and from the Bureau of Safety, I forgot, NB, what they call it? National Bureau of Standards, the Bureau of Standards, basically. Let me say Bureau of Standards. They got a new name now. They keep changing the name. Bureau of Standards. So the 2 of them are on present offshore. They have rep offshore to look at different things, like we calibrate the meters and all of these issues. So when Kaichor News keeps pushing this all the time about we're now monitoring, we do have a number of things that's happening now. We intend to do parallel things in the future, but right now there are key parameters that they measure, that we measure, that we get the screen shared to us, the dashboard. So what I will do, I'll have the ministry do a press release and release it to you to show how much work is being done by these agencies on the safety side and monitoring, defending national interests from both a revenue perspective, etc. We're still working on the environmental and safety regulations to the new law that we passed. We're finalizing the non-fiscal elements of the PSA. So once this is done, this would be, remember we said we had some pushback on the non-fiscal elements, that they were too harsh, and that needs to be finalized. We're moving forward with the discussions. I think a non-disclosure agreement is to be signed between Fulcrum and Exxon and the government of Guyana to move forward with the discussion on the monetization of gas. So just to give you an update, there are lots of things that are happening in that area too. I've seen again the people, the old guard, but sometimes I don't want to even mention them. The Ogunses, around election time, they roll them out. They just roll them out, literally roll them out. The Ogunses and the Hines, and with their racism, the usual stuff. Oh, Afro-Guyanese they have a bad time, although they have had control over Guyana, not just in the 28 years and the 5 years, but they had another nearly 3 years or so when they controlled the parliament. Majority of time, and they lament Afro-Guyanese, the condition of Afro-Guyanese. But the point is that in the same period when Ogunse and Hines and all of them, imagine there were specialists at SARA. I don't believe some of these people could specialists at anything, but they were working at SARA, cushy jobs. you find out how many Afro-Guyanese got plots of land from the APNU or a house lot. In fact, and the same agency they were working for, I'm going to say in the others, Office of the President, you had nearly 3,000, maybe over 3,000 acres of land were given out to about 4 individuals in the Office of the President, but not to ordinary people. So they were talking about empowerment of Afro-Guyanese. Now they were empowering themselves in that period. I mentioned scholarships already. I mentioned jobs. What about the tens of thousands of people who didn't have a job? Afro-Guyanese included in Linden and all these places who are now working for government or getting a job. It's just the usual stuff we'd have to deal with from these people. And as we get closer to elections, it's going to get even worse. And they've started back the corruption thing. Last week I dealt with that. I made it clear that at every agency you have a review now. We're moving to pre-qualify people. We're taking serious action against individuals who are involved in any way whatsoever. But you need to understand that we have over 100 procuring agencies. We have thousands of evaluators. We have hundreds of engineers who have to supervise the contract. It's how difficult it is to get everybody to comply with the rule, particularly when someone wants to tweak the rules to steal from people or to get money from them. And we've been addressing a ton of these things, not just at the MPTA, but at their different levels. So it is a huge undertaking, and you do have people who are deliberately hell-bent on making the system not work, because if a system works, then it's harder for them to be corrupt. But the evaluators, when we get 3 random evaluators, who is there to say that the person can call the evaluator that we list and then get them to give a different point to a different score to the bid? So you think when it goes to the cabinet or at the ministerial level, everybody will go and check every score? Because they would not see the bulk of the document that came in. If they had to do that, they can't do anything else. So you have to rely on the scores that come up, and sometimes that's where it happens. So we're dealing with this already. Of course, they would sensationalize everything. I saw a good editorial in Starbrook. I didn't mean to be critical. I recognize that sometimes there are helpful comments and expose that where the system did not work, and it helps the executive to address them. What I can assure people is that there'll be no cover-up. But we also, whilst dealing with the cases where you do have corruption, you can't make it look like it's all of the contracts we do, because 95% of them are done on time, and they're creating benefits for people of this country. The billions upon billions of contracts. I explained to you, nobody writes about the 1.3 billion contract in Sophia, or 75 persons, contractors who are working on 1.3 billion. These are small people. Why don't they say that? And a lot of them are from Georgetown. And the same thing, Region 10, all the contracts there in Region 10. In Berbice, all the contracts there, we want to go to people who live in these regions. So that people get a lot. What about those small people? Nobody was helping them before. 75 persons are working in A, C, D field, and some in E. And we have B field now to award soon. We are awarding in region. We're moving now in 3 and 5, and we've already, I think, 3 and 5. Now 3 and 10, going to 5, then 6, and the other hinterland regions. But there is a serious attempt to help people too that have been excluded from the system. Nobody writes about that. the success story of the PPP to get 75 small new contractors working now in Sophia, when one man would have gotten the contract in the past. What about empowering those people? And you check how many are Afro-Guyanese too. So it happens all around the country. If you had Nigel Hughes, he will go to see 15 Indian small contractors in Berbice and say all the work is given to them. But when you go to Georgetown, you'll see a different picture when you come to Georgetown. And so it's a balance. Nobody talks about these things, about the success of the PPP in bringing in a ton of small people, giving them a stake in the system. They ignore that totally. So we continue to do that, but at the same time, we do need to tackle the cases where we have corruption too. And there are cases where we do have corruption. I'm going to end there. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Kim King, Oil Now. You mentioned last week, sir, that if some of the companies from the first oil block auction are not able to find the partners and or the money to pay the fees, you may have to abandon the process.
Yes.
At what point do you decide that you've waited enough for those companies to do that?
We do have time on our side because it's not like we are under any rush to go to the second auction. If there was like a timeline set for the second auction, we had to bring this to a close by a particular time. So we're still working with the companies. Who knows, maybe they may be able to raise the financing. And so that is one of the reasons. And the second reason is the move to do 3D seismic. The third thing is that there's a meeting slated with CGX for Friday of this week, at which we will have a discussion with them, and then a cabinet paper will be presented to determine how we deal with that matter.
Okay, with respect to the plan to conduct seismic, have you identified any additional areas for potential action, aside from the lack of seismic, that could improve the attractiveness of the next auction?
Well, the fiscal, there has been a call to reduce that. Our fiscal conditions are very high, onerous. We don't share that view. We don't share that view that the 10% royalty is unreasonable, and a 10% tax, especially in a country now that is not a frontier country any longer. You're going to be producing 1.3 million barrels a day soon. So we're getting to be like a fairly mature jurisdiction. And so we doubt that we are going to change the fiscal conditions, but we are prepared to be a bit more flexible on some of the other positions that we put in place. For example, in the past, if you get a block and you don't do anything, there is no consequence to it for that. You can just hand it out, hold it for 4 or 5 years, and then hand it back. Now you have to put up a development plan. So your development plan to do the wells may be $400 million US. If you don't do anything, the fine is $200 million US for holding the block, and that's part of what we have now. So people are complaining it might be a bit too onerous, and we may be a bit more flexible on those sorts of conditions.
And what timeline are you looking at for a potential second auction?
Well, now that we're going on the route of the seismic, we'd have to talk to our international advisors. They know what's going on in the field of auctions globally. the time when we had put out our expressions of, well, the auction, you had 80 other countries in the same process at the same time. So we are competing with 80 other countries globally for petroleum money or dollars to invest. So our advisors should guide us on this with knowledge of the international market. Should they say that we believe that there's a reasonable chance that without the 3D seismic, you may be able to get some good bids in, then we may set an earlier date before the completion of the work that we expect the companies to do on 3D seismic.
Finally, did you say, with respect to the perceived conflict of interest with respect to Mr. Nigel Hughes, that the government would consider some sort of investigation into that?
It could very well lead to that. Could very well lead to that. That's all I'm saying at this time. Could very well lead to that.
Hi, good afternoon, Dr. Jagdeo. Sharon Belgrave, Kiteshare News. Dr. Jagdeo, Exxon Financial showed that Guyana was charged for exploration during the COVID-19 period. Other company claimed in its work program was affected by the COVID-19 pandemic and applied for an additional year to keep to relinquish the blocks in Starboard block. Can you explain what happened there?
But you are aware we went through this issue at great length. So President Granger, in I think August of 2020, just before he left, he gave an extension. That document said that they were supposed to submit, so you'll get the extension, but submit documents to us. So it happened before we assumed office. We then asked them to submit the original exploration plan and how it was affected. And they proved to the satisfaction of the ministry that there was a departure from the original exploration plan. They did do some exploration, but it was a more aggressive exploration plan. There was a departure, and that is why the extension was given. But it was not given, it was given before, but we concurred with it. That's why we did not make an issue.
The financial also showed that millions were deducted last year for decommissioning. Can you explain why Exxon is being allowed to deduct monies for decommissioning from projects that have not been, that is not yet started, that is not producing oil at the moment? Is this part of the agreement, or?
I don't know what you're saying. From which project they have not deducted for decommissioning?
No, they have deducted from projects that is not yet started. They start taking out money for decommissioning from projects that is yet to start up, to start producing oil.
For decommissioning?
Yeah.
And you are saying to me, you checked that and that's accurate? Are you saying that you checked that?
Well, so far that's what we seem to be reflected in the financial.
No, not seem. You're checking. You're asking me a question, and I'm asking you. You check that to be accurate.
Yeah, so far.
So far?
That's why I'm asking
right.
to set some clarity.
I'm not going to comment on it because I think it's not accurate. And but if the project hasn't started as yet, my assumption is that you can't deduct from it for decommissioning if it hasn't been even commissioned as yet. If you have not commissioned a project, you should not deduct from decommissioning. But I don't trust your kind of thing. Okay. I'm just saying that I don't trust it. That is why I'm saying that if you don't commission, you can't decommission. And but let me deal with that. And by the way, so let me go through this again. Remember, you keep mentioning this stuff about say how Exxon has reported their profits here locally. So, for example, last year, right, 2023, $11 billion of sale revenue, right? So, under the international financial reporting standards, they have a particular way that they have to report it. So I said to you guys, let's get the numbers, because I explained to you the principle, why it is different using the international financial reporting standard versus accounting for the provisions of the PSA. So under the IFRS, $11 billion of sale, less $1.6 billion of operating expenses, minus $1.8 billion of depreciating expenses, minus $1.5 billion of tax expenses. Because under that, although they don't pay the taxes, they have to report it under the International Financial Reporting Standard. So it's $6 billion of reported net income. So if you go on the other side now, it's same $11 billion of sale revenue. But what is 75% of $11 billion? It's $8.4 billion goes to cost recovery. So the government of Guyana, of the 25% remaining, the government of Guyana gets $1.7 billion and Exxon gets $1.3 billion. Right? Because that includes our 2% royalty, 50-50 plus 2. So when you account under the petroleum agreement, PSA, this is how it works out. When you report based on the International Financial Reporting Standard, which is what they have to do here, then it shows a different level of net income, right? And that is the difference there. So which we had explained theoretically, but I've asked them to put together the numbers, how much actually, so give an example of it so that people understand it better.
And finally, there's something circulating that the permanent secretary of the Human Service and Social Security Ministry resigned with immediate effect because of an alleged corruption. Is there any truth to this, or is just an allegation?
I don't know if there's a resignation there, but people move all the time. I think people are moving around, but I don't know if it's there was a resignation. First time I'm hearing about this, that there was a resignation.
Dr. Jagdeo, is your government satisfied with the progress of the ongoing 6 regional hospitals across the country?
On the 6, I think they told me that the last report I had, which was about 2 or 3 months ago, that 3 were on track to be completed by year end, and then the others would go into next year. So I think we'd have to examine it, but they would be completed in maybe the first quarter or so next year. I don't remember when exactly they should have ended. I think it may be end 2024, might be end 2024. But I told you at a previous press conference that we're already looking to how we staff these hospitals, because we can't just complete the hospitals. We have to now get people to run these hospitals. And therefore, that's a big challenge now, and we may have to recruit people from abroad apart from training our own people. And that's why we keep saying as many people who want to go into training in the medical field, we will, like nurses, nursing aides and stuff like that, we'll pay for them to be trained too.
Secondly, has the government received the reports regarding the inspection of all security companies providing service for the
No,
government?
I asked Ashley saying up to a couple of days ago, he has not received it as yet, because he has directed that that has to be done. But as I made it clear, any security company that's not paying the NIS for their staff, they have a habit of doing this. They have large numbers of people, they have a habit of doing this. Deducting the people's money and keeping the money. Sometimes they have to pay a share of it too. They don't pay their share, and then they keep working for government. That's not going to happen. If they're not complying with that rule, they're going to see their contracts terminated.
President Ali mentioned at his press conference that government has commenced commercial discussions with airline operators. Do you care to share with who these players may be?
I'm not aware of that and what's the nature of the discussion in airline operators. If they made a request of the government, but I know that there are a few companies that have gotten the approval from civil aviation to start new airlines and new routes to Guyana.
Let me clarify.
Okay.
So commence commercial discussions with airline operators since Guyana received its carbon credit certification.
Yeah, that's
sorry,
a totally different matter. That's what I was wondering about. But yes, so now we're eligible. So our carbon, we've been fighting to get our carbon sold into a compliance market. We've been fighting through the UNFCCC process for them to add forest carbon to a compliance market. It's been a long fight, and they are rejecting it throughout. Not UNFCCC, but some NGOs and others. I pointed out that many countries, tropical countries, suffer because of this. I pointed out also that in Guyana's case, we have 1% of global tropical forests, but we're already earning more than, or we're on track, if we extrapolate from our market-based foreign carbon, to earn more from the market than the 99% of the other forests that they will get from public funds. 1% of our forests can earn more through the market than the 99% of remaining tropical forests will get through public funds. So it's a successful model. So we didn't wait on the compliance market to move forward and to get our credit certified. We started exploring that. So what we've done now, we got their one compliance market. Although there's no UNFCCC compliance market, that there's one in the world that uses the forest carbon in they allow trading. It's a Singapore-based market, and it is for airlines. And therefore, we've started the discussions to see whether we can sell our certified carbon to some of the airlines. So the prices hopefully will be higher. But the UNFCCC is treating, and the negotiations there, the tropical countries badly. If we didn't branch out on our own a long time back, since 2009, set up our own LCDS, then we got a $250 million deal with Norway, then the $750 million with Hess. We would be like some other countries. Look at Suriname. Suriname, probably in the whole period, in the last 14 years, when we're talking about $1 billion, I doubt if they got $20 million. And so many others, because they're waiting on these other markets. We had to branch out on our own. And this is something we don't get credit for.
Good afternoon, Dr. Jagdeo and Ask Williams, Kaiser News. Dr. Jagdeo, you mentioned that currently Exxon is basically sharing their screen, which has real-time monitoring, and there are 3 government agencies that currently has access to the production data. Keeping this in mind, does the government still have plans at some point to procure independent meters?
Yes. I said yes. We still will do that separately. We will do that separately. But right now, there is this impression that we don't get any data. We don't do any monitoring. So you do have people from the Bureau of Standards on board the vessel, and also from GRA on board the vessel. And they look at the meters, the calibration of meters, all of these things, to look at the flow of the oil and the produced water. So, and then onshore, well, all of this information comes to Exxon, and it's updated every 10 minutes for produced water, gas, all of that stuff, oil, everything. How they see the production real time. And even data from the drilling, the wells and stuff like that. So this comes on the screen. So we have access to that dashboard too. 3 agencies, so we can also track what's going on offshore. But we plan to do our own thing independently later too. So I doubt it's going to change much what we see, but still we have the comfort. And it does not have to be huge. I was in Ghana, and I went one the evening to go to see how they're monitoring the gas. And so there's a modest building, like smaller than up here, smaller than this. And you had about 10 screens and individuals at that, and that's all they do. And so it does not have to be a massive operation, and we can get it done soon.
Secondly, with oil production revenues expected to rise appreciably in coming years, do you envisage that one day Guyana will be the ATM of the Caribbean, and are there any long-term plans to make Guyana the financial capital for the region?
ATM, it means that like people can draw our money anytime. No, we're not going to be ATM for anyone. It's disparaging of the Caribbean people to think too that they would see us as an ATM. You know, I think we have to ensure that our own people are prosperous. First, here in Guyana, wherever they live, in the most remote parts of the country, every Guyanese. That's the first order of business. And it will grow over the years. It's not going to happen overnight. Some people believe that because we started producing oil, that overnight we're going to be able to solve all of the tasks. I keep reminding them, like Nigel Hughes said, in this time of plenty, we must do more, right? We must get a law to give out all of this money. Does this guy know that of the budget, the $1.1 trillion budget that we have, less than 30% is funded from all the oil money that we get for last year? Almost oil money, and less than 30% of the budget. Where do you think the 70% of the other budget is funded from? More than non-oil revenue funds a greater share of the budget than oil revenue. But it's impossible to have a conversation of that nature with a Norton or a Nigel Hughes, because they're just anecdotal. Oh, share out all the oil money. Never mind, it's just 30% of our budget. And 90 billion already from 2020 to now has gone into increase in public sector wages of the 300 billion that we got in the budget. So it's impossible. So as we grow wealthier, our people across this country must benefit. High education standards, health standards, global standards. They must have safety in their home. We are investing a lot in safety from criminal activities, etc. They must have leisure. They must have good paying jobs. And they must have more opportunities to grow wealthy. That's our people. Wherever they live, whoever they vote for, whatever their race, men, women, our people. We also have to provide opportunities for people who fled this country. A lot of our people, our own people, fled Guyana. And they're going to come back, and they're our kith and kin, if you want to call them. These are our people. Wherever they fled to, from the Caribbean or North America or wherever, they have to come back home and they have to enjoy this prosperity in the future years. But we have to manage this well. We can't splurge now when we don't have money as yet, but later it's going to get better. That's it. And then we have to be generous to people in our region too, and people who suffer calamities around the world. Like, you recall when Haiti had the earthquake. I gave Haiti at that time, we didn't have money, $1 million US. And we paid it directly to the Haitian government. And then when the UN report came out, we are #1 in the world in terms of donor, because based on our per capita, our GDP. We gave Haiti in proportion to our GDP more than any country in the world at that time. And we didn't have oil money at that time when they had an earthquake in Haiti. When people face disasters, when we had our 2005 flood, we have people who sent stuff for us from the Caribbean, you know. Trinidad and Tobago sent pumps and all of that here for our people. So we got to keep an open mind to the people from our region too, and help. But I don't think they're looking at Guyana as the ATM. They're not gonna, and we're not gonna be the ATM for anyone. So I hope that doesn't come across that the people, Caribbean people, are looking to Guyana this way. I think they're not. They just wanna, and they should be able to invest here and share some of the prosperity too. So that's how I see it evolving in the future, as we go forward.
The government to meet future electricity demands in the gas energy project and also the Amila Falls hydroelectric project. Given the amount of electricity that's going to be generated from these two projects, can you say how confident is the government in GPL's grid to be able to handle this additional generation in a reliable manner?
That's a great question, because we've been addressing this. So you recall I said that there are 5 elements to the current project: the pipeline, the NGL facility, the power plant, the transmission from the power plant to the control center, and the control center. And combined, that's over $2 billion. The transmission alone from the power plant to take power back to Reed and Hoop and to be distributed along in Region 3, and then to bring the power across the river to the control center here by Eccles, which will dispatch it to the rest of the country. That is one element of this project, and all 5 are going on simultaneously now. They're being built now. Secondly, we're looking at upgrading a link, and I think Cummins Electrical has won that, a link from the Kingston power plant to Sophia, the substation at Sophia, so that we can bring more power in there, should we maybe across the river from that link, so we have a circle, so that makes the grid more reliable. If you have it goes in a single direction and anything happens on the grid, you then have outages. But if you have a circular grid, you can bring the power around this way. So we're probably crossing the Reed and Hoop into Kingston and then to the Sophia substation. But we're just upgrading right now the part from Kingston to Sophia. We've gone out to tender for over $200 million of work to upgrade transmission and distribution now before the power comes in to stabilize our system more, because we're generating more, but the old grid, we have an old grid, because a lot of these old transformers, old lines and stuff like that. So another 200 million has been tendered and is out. So that's another element of the project that's going to be implemented over the next 6-8 months. Then we're looking at a transmission main now going from maybe Garden of Eden all the way to Linden, because right now we're buying power from both sides at a very expensive rate and we're subsidizing it to the community. So we need to take some of this power up to Linden. And once that is built, we will then build some substations along the highway so we can distribute. You're going to have a lot of housing development along the highway so we can distribute power there. We're also putting in some solar units around the country, 35 megawatts of solar power. We're talking to a company to take our gas, to take it to transfer it to power plants in Essecubo, in Bartica, in Lethem, that are not connected to the grid, so that they too can enjoy power generated from gas, and then the same rate that people pay elsewhere, which is like half of what they're paying now. So all of this is part of the plan. We have a comprehensive plan to upgrade transmission and distribution along with the generating capacity. So you're right that we have to focus on it. Sometimes it's a bit it's overloading the system, because even when you have more power and you're running it through these old lines or old transformers, you get localized faults all the time. People get blackout in the area. So we are upgrading the whole system, and these would be smart grids. So on the line itself, you have a fiber optic cable that will be connected to the control center. So you don't need to know a report when a blackout takes place anywhere else. Real time, you can know from the control center here at Eccles, wherever in the country, or in the interconnected grid, you have a power outage, and dispatch people immediately. And you can also remotely shut off some areas. So this is what the control center will grow into, that sort of thing, a modern grid. It's taken a lot of work, but it will get there soon, hopefully.
Thank you, sir. And permit me one quick follow-up to one of my previous questions. The meters. Can you say when government is looking to go to tender to acquire these?
To what?
The meters. Can you say when government is looking to go to
meters?
tender? To when you have your own system to monitor the production?
Oh, no, but it's not just meters. It's a comprehensive system. Right now, we calibrate the meters. Bureau of Standard calibrates the meter. That's part of the license. They have to submit the meters to us to be calibrated, and then they monitor the reading on the meters. So if we calibrate the meters, the existing meters, that means we're verifying that the meters can't be tampered with and everything else, and then they are doing the readings from the meters, and we have people from Bureau of Standard on the FPSOs themselves. So it's not just one thing, right? This overall monitoring, the independent monitoring, is not just about meters, because they do have a great fix on these meters. I know there's a fixation at Kaichur about the meters. Glenn Lal talk about these meters all the time. Yeah, but we do have the calibration.
Jagdeo, you mentioned that 50,000 jobs have been created since
Actually,
20.
more.
More.
I'm conservative.
Okay. Over 50,000. Can you say how many may have been created for individuals in the hinterland? I know about the CSO program
Yes.
only.
So we have under the part-time job program. So about that in the hinterland, we have close to 3,000 CSO, 2,700 or 2,800, and we have probably another 3,000 part-time workers. This is leaving out people who are working on government contracts and a whole range of other activities. So you're talking about maybe 6,000 people, minimum 6,000, which is substantial. I mean, in the hinterland with the smaller population, that's a substantial number of people who are here.
Contracts from the government?
Yes, on the contracts, a lot more are working. Remember, we're spending on a single road in the Region 1. More money now than what APNU probably spent in the 5 years. Say in Mabruma settlement. The Mabruma settlement, we're doing about 3 kilometers of concrete road through the whole settlement. That's going to cost it's about $1 million or so per kilometer. So you're talking about $3 million alone in that area. That's $600 million here. In a whole year, the regional budget for hinterland and the APNU is less than $600 million. So I'm not just talking about Mabruma settlement. Then we're building, for example, a road going in to Guyana, past Offshore, going in there. We're a concrete road. We've started from Moruca going up to Quibana. These are the big roads that we're doing. Then the internal roads, a lot. That's only in Region 1. If you go to Region 9, you would see the similar thing, but we've also started building concrete and asphaltic roads in the big villages themselves. So a lot of work is being done and local people are working. So these are on government contracts. But because of the heightened level of economic activity, Region 1 was practically all of when I went there to campaign, I went to Mabruma, then to Port Kaituma. And everybody was complaining that APNU had put in place the collection of taxes. And now, we were not collecting taxes in those areas from imports that came from Venezuela and Brazil, in Region 9 too, from Brazil, because of the high cost of living and the border area. We said, if you don't bring the goods past the Pomeroon or Kurupukari, then we allow that kind of status. The GRA would not really go after you. It's not in our law, but I shouldn't be saying this, but I think next Kaichor News will go after it, but it was a policy decision. Kaichor News will go after that. Jagdeo justifies illegality. But the people in those regions benefited. Soon as they got into office, they put up customs outposts, everything started. The water came in from the area, they got to pay $500 a case. The soft drink came in, they had to pay for that, everything. Pushed up not just cost of living, but also killed economic activities. We removed that back when we got into office. We said no. And we've seen a flourishing once again of business-related activities. So that means more jobs for people in these areas. So this sort of, they don't talk about those kinds of things, but those were devastating to people who live in the hinterland. For example, putting the VAT on airline ticket and freight into the hinterland. You imagine you're flying into the hinterland, you got to pay a VAT on your ticket, and then if you're posting goods into the hinterland, you will have to pay VAT on the freight for the airline. People don't remember these things. And therefore, they get away with, oh, I love you again. All right. Thank you very much.